Cuban cigars, are they the best in the world? We're here to figure that out. I'm Eric, you're watching Oak Glen Tobacconist. If you're interested in several of the cigars I'm talking about right now, but not the Cuban ones, check us out, you know where to find us. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. It really helps us here on the channel. Make certain you hit the bell so that you are alerted every time we produce new content. So we are here to talk about Cuban cigars. I get this question a lot within the humidor here at the shop. Are Cuban cigars the best there is? Well, I really think it boils down to several different things, and I will also state a lot is preference. However, with that stated, I want to make a few points that I think is very important when considering the best cigars in the world. So prior to the embargo, originally Cuban cigars kind of reached the height of popularity by movie stars, people like Winston Churchill, big public figures that were smoking Cubans. People looked up to that. They saw that thinking Cubans are the best. But I will say it's not just that. In fact, a lot of the manufacturers, a lot of the makers, the blenders of Cuban cigars, they were carrying down family tradition and producing things at the highest quality they could. As well as you have a very particular flavor and profile with Cubans with where the soil is, where it's grown. And a lot of these things come down to the soil. However, something to consider, point number one about Cuban cigars, especially as we are post-embargo, right now it is illegal to purchase Cuban cigars on American soil. However, you can get them from out of the country. Are they the best right now? Well, the first point I want to make is that those same manufacturers, those same blenders, those families, they then relocated when Castro came into command. Then they ended up becoming refugees and scattered to other places, such as Dominican Republic, Honduras, Nicaragua, Florida, various different places. So those family traditions and those styles and craftsmanship, the artistry, also are in those people, and those people ended up somewhere else. So you have what's now known as New World cigars, cigars being produced in these countries like Nicaragua, Dominican Republic. And you have those same makers of Cuban descent making those cigars within those countries. So I think it's very important to realize if there's a particular cigar or particular brand people really enjoyed, the talent is also with where that enjoyment is. So I think a lot of people like AJ Fernandez, the Plasencia factory, Jose Patron, all these people that came from Cuba and settled elsewhere, they're also now making cigars in the New World. Point number two, you have tobaccos that originally grown in Cuba, but now they're being grown in other places. In fact, something like the Corojo seed, I've talked about that before. Corojo seed comes from Cuba, but it was susceptible to things like blue mold, black shank. Other companies developed what we know as is Corojo 99. This is a hybrid seed originally from the Cuban seed. In fact, a lot of New World cigars that you will see have that Cuban seed Habano or Cuban seed Corojo. That is taking the original seed, but there's hybrid or different inflections grown somewhere else, and you get those differences within the New World cigars. Point number three, again, is preference. Now, a lot of times, when the tobacco is grown in a certain region, if it's grown in Nicaragua in the Jalapa region, or Condega, or Esteli, there are inherent traits within the soil and the region that gives the cigar and the tobacco its characteristics. The same is for Cuba. In fact, more often than not, I have found that Cuban cigars will possess things like floral notes, hay or grassy notes, sometimes a creamy aspect to it, a little bit of sweetness to it. You're gonna find a lot of Cubans, not all of them, but a lot of them you're gonna find in the more mild to medium range. What does that translate to someone like me who likes a fuller body, fuller strength cigar? Well, more than likely, I'm probably not going to gravitate towards a Cuban all the time because it's not offering that Nicaraguan spice or that Honduran sweetness and the kick that it delivers on the back end, or some of the Dominican diversity. And so a lot of companies now use multi-country blends to produce really interesting flavors. Cuban puros are just that, tobacco strictly from Cuba. So you're going to have that issue whether it's your preference or not your preference, but that flavor profile is sometimes really polarizing depending on who is smoking. And point number four, lastly, I would also say it's very interesting to note that the quality control may not be up to the same standards as other companies and countries. Places like Costa Rica, places like DR, there's a lot of different tactics and methods that manufacturers go through to strive in New World cigars, creating great construction, great complexity. At this time in the game, I don't necessarily see that happening in Cuba. I'm not saying all of them are constructed that way. Of course, this is my opinion, but it's also not like every single Cuban cigar is like this. something to take in consideration. So what I would advise, if you're looking for that type of Cuban aspect flavor, some of the heritage of Cuba, and also some of the inflections in the flavor profile, I suggest you check out a lot of New World cigars. Such as, I have several here that I feel like illustrates it. One is the Buena Cosecha from Aganorsa leaf. This uses Corojo 99, that seed that we talked about, but it's 100% from the Jalapa Valley in Nicaragua. So you have a lot of that sweetness, that salivation, that spice that Corojo delivers, being grown from Aganorsa in Nicaragua, using originally what was known as a Cuban seed. Next you have Mr. AJ Fernandez himself, of Cuban descent. This is the Blue Cheese Toro. This cigar offers that Nicaraguan spice, that Nicaraguan-like strength, but also well-balanced, and it uses a Habano wrapper, also Habano being from Cuba, but a really good flavor profile. Another to recommend is Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust Sobremesa Brûlée. This is one of the king of Connecticut's. It's sweet, it's creamy, it's got some of those aspects that Cuban cigars have, construction really well, but really complex and diverse. Steve Saka of Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust has done an amazing job. Then the last two here is Knuckle Sandwich, using the same tobacco from AJ Fernandez. However, it is blended by Eric Espinoza and Guy Fieri. Knuckle Sandwich Connecticut is diverse. It has a lot of complexity, some of that creamy sweetness in there as well, but you also have some of those like alfalfa notes, those like herbal notes as well. Really good cigar to turn to. And last but certainly not least, HVC. It's within the name Havana City. HVC using the Corojo seed that Aganorsa puts out. However, very different blended in Renier Lorenzo style. Really good cigar, especially if you're looking for that kind of Cuban-esque experience. So those are just a few suggestions to check out of New World cigars, and maybe drop down in the comments, what has your experience been with Cuban cigars, and how do they stack up to some of the New World cigars here on the market? I would love to know your thoughts. As always, thank you for watching. We will see you next time on the channel here at Oakland Tobacconist.